Hello there, Force of Will players, and welcome back to another Wander Wednesday. This week, we're going to be taking a look at a personal favorite deck of mine, honestly. It's the first deck that I ever top 8'd a GP with, and then I even went on to top 8 another GP with it a year later. And every event that I actually topped with it, it was never that in a particularly good spot. It was never necessarily bad, but it was never necessarily good either, right? So we'll just take a quick look into it, and it's going to be Nine-Tailed Fox, or Lilius Petal, the Agent of Salvation. So when I first top 8'd with this deck, this was right when Priscia had just come out, the red-green Priscia from Return of the Dragon Emperor RDE. So that deck had been poised to do very well. It was very aggressive, very strong. And the other two decks coming into that format were Fox, the original Fox coming just out of Lel, as well as Gwyber Turbo with Feasting. So those were kind of the decks at the time, and then you had Priscia come into play, Gil Alhamat came into play, and we had a couple people take those kinds of events by storm. But I ended up playing a red Fox list, which ended up topping my first event with it, and then a year later, I ended up playing a Griffinless Fox in Shahrazad format, and top 8'd an event in California with it. But so this is its current incarnation, and it has Griffin back. So we finally have Griffin back, and we have a bunch of new stuff to play with. If you guys watched the Seven Kings tier list that they did recently, which is up on YouTube for Wanderer, they have Fox at tier 2, and our lists are going to be fairly similar. There will be a little bit of differences in terms of numbers and some cards played, but a lot of the stuff will be kind of similar into what we're playing. With the release of the new set Game of Gods Revolution coming out fairly soon, within the next month, I believe, we're going to actually get a lot of darkness cards that revolve around self-milling. And that's actually pretty good for Lilius Petal and could potentially change the way that the deck is played. But for now, this is what we're working with. So to get started, we're just gonna, I kind of have this organized, but so we have the darkness main sack outlets for Nine-Tailed Fox at the very top. If you're unsure of what Nine-Tailed Fox does, Lilius Petal, he judgments for 0, and on his backside, you can sacrifice a wind resonator, a darkness resonator, and a killing stone, a specific stone called Killing Stone, there it is, in order to summon a chimera from either, I believe it's your deck, remove from game zone, or outside of the game. I think it specifies those 3 zones, even though RFG is currently considered part of the outside of the game zone. Or maybe it's like deck hand or outside of the game. But so anyway, it brings in a chimera from there, and the main one that you want to bring in is Griffin, which we do have one of in this deck. So Griffin gets 2 stones when it comes into play. So that's how you kind of ramp up stones, so on and so forth. What are the good effects, right? It's either going to be very good enter effects or very good on death effects. So to start off, we have Dracula. So Dracula, when he dies, he's our current recursion. We don't have Demonic Dead anymore. It's still banned in Wanderer. And Monkey Trapped in Life costs mana in order to keep recurring it. Dracula does not. So when Dracula dies, he puts a delayed automatic effect onto the game state, basically. And then at the next end of turn, he'll come into field even more powerful than before with additional +1/+1 counters. So he's kind of a recurring resonator that just keeps getting bigger and bigger the longer the game goes on. Second, we have Lucifer, Defeated One Wing. This is a newer card. It's instant speed, it has flying, and then it also has a drain type effect. Your opponent loses 500, you gain 500 on enter, and then when it's destroyed, your opponent discards a card. So it has that kind of additional effect. I don't remember, we can actually check, I don't remember if Lilius Petal says destroy the card or not. So I don't know if you can get that. You banish, so it's not destruction. So you won't get the discard type effect. However, you will get the life loss effect, which is prevalent against a deck like Belial or other things like that. And then it also has quick cast. So just having quick cast is also a nice touch. Makage Rhea, same thing, quick cast. She searches your deck for a darkness card and puts it into the grave. She gives Vampire's Drain, and she has an additional effect. If she's banished by Mage Arts, you can get her back, which we see with Part of True Power and Griffin. When you play a Makage Rhea, you're mainly wanting to dump either a Part of True Power or Griffin Racing Across Darkness. You can drop other stuff if you need to, but these are predominantly going to be the main two. The one Griffin, just to get it into your grave to kind of loop parts of True Power, and then Part of True Power to get more Griffins, more Chimeras, etc., and loop them out. Witch of the Fallen Kingdom, you hit Seal 5 pretty easily, as I'd assume you'd assume, with Griffins and getting more stones and so on and so forth. And then the witches that you can reveal, one is a green witch, so just playing a Witch of the Fallen Kingdom, you get a witch with a pointy hat. That's the green and the darkness resonator, or wind and darkness resonator, that you need for the fox effect. So it already gives you that, and Witch with a pointy hat is a Lorite/fog type effect. Witch of the Fallen Kingdom is also kind of a floodgate, prevents your opponent from searching the deck. So it does have application there. Is also quick cast, which is better for us. Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom, 2-drop sorcery speed. On enter, you get the top card of your Magic Stone deck into the field rested. This is to help you get into your killing stones, get them faster. Just another decent green resonator, and 2-mana sorcery speed type effects are the least cancelable in the game currently. Enters kind of still suffer from Lorite, however, 2-mana sorcery speed is in a better spot. Melfi is just a 0-mana green or wind resonator. It's really all she is, right? Because you get 2 mana back, 2 will back when you play her, and then you draw a card, so she replaces herself too. So she kind of functions as like a quick get your guys out type deal. It gets you into your darkness stuff. She replaces herself so you don't go down on card advantage. I'm not playing Absorbing Knowledges, which are Brad cards. Fox works very well with Brad cards because it says this card cannot be destroyed. So you still get as much of the effect as possible, so you get all the additional Brad effects without actually killing your J-Ruler. But I don't really have those. It is an option. Totally fine to play them. I believe the Seven Kings guys had some of those types of effects in their deck. Starving Beast, Absorbing Knowledge, Spark of Life, stuff like that. But Melfi is just a free card, effectively. Free Wind Resonator. Wind Servant of Ragnarok, same deal. It's a free Wind Resonator. That's really all what the Wind Resonators are. They're supposed to get you into your Darkness Resonators, count as a free card, so you can play 2 in the same turn. Part of True Power and Griffin, we kind of already talked about. You dump them off of Makage Rhea, get them into play, you cycle them in order to cycle your Chimeras. The other thing with Part of True Power is it can cycle a Garyon into play, if you somehow have one dumped into your grave instead of RFG'd. So you can get that out, prevent your opponent from playing cards with 1 drop or less, and because a Part of True Power is a 2-mana sorcery speed card, it's in a very good spot. For setting the stage for Providence. This is a tech that the Seven Kings guys had that we also had kind of talked about previously. I didn't know how prevalent it would be, but it's actually very impactful considering the amount of enters. I mean, Fox's effect is lore-writable in and of itself. Almost all of these effects to get extra stuff are all lore-writable, so Lorite plays a very impactful role against your deck. So having setting the stage to kind of just give you a free turn to do whatever you want is very impactful. For us, the only blue we're playing is the Moonshades. I think the Seven Kings guys had a blue greenstone or blue blackstone, one of the two. Like, they had 5 blue sources. We're only playing the 4. There's no real reason, I think, to play more. You're not going to flip Fox until, I mean, you have to hit a killing stone on turn 1 in order to flip him on turn 2, and then you would also have to stick 2 1-drops, which means they're not getting Garyoned. So unless you go second, odds are you're not going to be flipping on turn 2, which means you're not flipping till turn 3. And at that point, odds are you probably have a Moonshade in play. So the ratios just kind of work out better. And because you're only ever using blue for Providence, unless you somehow put a blue card in your sideboard, which I don't have, then you don't need the additional blue mana. You just rather have more darkness or more wind mana. Right. So that's my reasoning for that. But for setting the stage, protects your turn, protects all of your effects. Unless you just kind of get rolling. Fair's spell. This is just the cancel suite. 2 Fairs, 4 Lorite, 3 Garyon, 2 number 13. So why these ratios? Garyon also functions with the deck because he's wind and darkness, right? So you can send him to grave, you can part of true power him with Mikage Rhea, and stuff like that. You get that additional floodgate effect to prevent your opponent from playing 1-mana cards. You can cheat Garyon out early. It's fairly powerful. And you can sack Garyon off to turn into chimeras if your opponent should try and kill him. So he has that kind of application. Lorite is a wind resonator, which just makes him good for Fox, and he also cancels other Lorites, which is primarily the card that's going to be stopping your types of effects. So being able to cancel Lorite is very powerful, as well as being part of the engine to keep the deck going. Which is why we also have 3 Garyon, because it also cancels Lorite. Fair Spell also cancels Lorite, but at the end of the day, you're mainly worried about... it is a worse option than Lorite itself to cancel other Lorites. So Fair Spell is there to kind of pick up the slack on cards that Lorite can't hit or Garyon can't hit. Higher CMC quick cast cards, Tales of Fantasia and Alice decks, maybe like Phantasmal Ascendant if you need to cancel that. Isis, it can cancel. Stuff like that. Number 13, again, you hit seal very easily. So you get this card down to 1 mana pretty quickly. And like I said, 2 mana sorcery speed is in a very good spot. So you might see more people play 2 mana sorcery speed cards, which means number 13 just has more application against those types of decks. And because they might not be expecting it, you can get away with kind of canceling that and preventing your opponent from playing those cards that are in that more sweet spot of a mana value. Currently in the current metagame. Anyway, kind of already talked about it. 4 Moonshade, 2 Black Silence, 4 Killing Stone. It's pretty standard. You don't really care about the life drain. You're playing the Lucifers and you're also playing Amit. So you're going to have a lot of life. You don't really need to worry about the pay effect. Black Silence, you just want more wind or darkness mana. And then Killing Stone is wind and darkness, and you need it in order to get the Fox effects. I did 3 Griffin, 2 Amit, 1 Mana Core. You can change this. You can make it 3 Griffin, 2 Amit, 2 Mana Core. You could do 2/2/2. I probably wouldn't change it past that. Mana Core is typically the least impactful. He's the more like tech one, but you do also get to look at their hand and discard a card, which can be pretty important. Amit's the removal effect and also the largest one, so he just has a bunch of application via damage and just getting in for lethal. Griffin is just the standard, keeps your loop of stones going, etc., etc. Pumpkin Witch is also there to get off of Witch of the Fallen Kingdom in order to kind of go for like an OTK with, like, you get a Griffin, swing for 12, you have a Pumpkin Witch in play, have a Griffin, swing for 12, Fox effect away that Griffin, get a new Griffin, swing for 12, 2 new stones, part of true power, sack that Griffin, get the new Griffin out, swing for another 12, right? You can kind of see where those like types of loops are going. That's just kind of how the deck can get like a OTK and kind of push, because you're mainly a control deck. You're trying to get set up and then get into a loop of resources in order to deny your opponent value and other resources, right? Other thoughts that I've had for this list, potentially playing Blessing of Yggdrasil. Again, you're probably not flipping until turn 2 at the latest, but turn 1 at the earliest, turn 2 probably the latest. If you flip later than that, you're probably in a bad spot. So Blessing of Yggdrasil, again, it's that 2 mana sweet spot. It guarantees you a Killing Stone. If you played a Wind Servant of Ragnarok earlier in the turn, a Melfi, like if you already have a board set up, you can Blessing of Yggdrasil into your Killing Stone if you haven't hit it yet. So that's always an option as well. Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom serves kind of the same purpose, except it can be Lorited. So it is a wind resonator, which is helpful for the Fox effect, but it can be Lorited, which is kind of a con that it has against it for as opposed to like Blessing of Yggdrasil or stuff like that. Messenger of Lilia's Petal is kind of similar, darkness and green, 2-drop. It can be Lorited, but it does stack a Killing Stone. It's similar in that regard. You can up counts of part of true power. You could potentially put this to 3 or 4. You could play March of the Dead. That's another good one. It resurrects 2-drop or lowers if you awaken it. Awakens for 3. Other things you could potentially cut. If you don't need to worry about Belial players, you can cut the Lucifers. They're not incredibly important. They're just very good against that type of deck strategy. You can force them in order to go to 0 life, force out a God Art, and make sure they just don't Inferno you, right? Other things, you could potentially play Shift Presea in here. It's just if you're using the mana to pump up Big Show, you're not putting out creatures into play or resonators into play. So it might suffer a little bit via that, but that is another option potentially. If you want cancel spells that aren't cancel spells, to get around like cards cannot be canceled type effects, you can play the 2-drop Welser, the alternative Welser. That's a pretty good option for Nine-Tailed Fox. It has a whole bunch of stuff because it can kind of be a tech suite of darkness and green cards, which are typically the two best colors in the game. Light is kind of getting up there, but green and darkness have kind of held down the fort for a very long time, with red just always being like the aggro deck and kind of being the boogeyman against those types of control decks, if it's just fast enough. But anyway, that is the list for this week. I'll be attaching it to this post that I put out for the video, but I will be doing a stream this Friday. What I'll be doing for that stream is I'll be going over the spoilers for it, but I'm also going to be talking about potential bans, right? So a lot of people clamor for like a ban list when events happen. They see certain things that they don't like. They want stuff banned that they don't like. I'm going to be talking about that kind of stuff, but primarily what determines like a healthy game, what bans would be considered healthy, potentially, what cards should be put on like a watch list, and then kind of like how you would reset FOW with a major ban list hit, right? So I'll be talking about all that, so feel free to stop by. It'll be at 7:30 p.m. PST. And yeah, it'll be great. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this week. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.